Welcome to another episode of the Meal Prep Monday podcast. I'm your host and founder of Prep Dish, Allison Schaaf. In today's episode, I am sharing 4 questions to ask as you're doing a pantry clean out. Before we get into the episode, I have a message to read from Prep Dish subscriber Bryn. Bryn says, Prep Dish has been helpful in taking away the mental load of thinking of what dishes to make each week. They already selected them for me. All I need to do is tailor them to our family's preferences. Having meals prepped is very convenient for busy nights and allows me to keep our family supplied with whole food-based meals nearly all the time. It has completely transformed how I prepare food and feed my family. Bryn, thank you so much for sharing. And I just love hearing that we've transformed how you are feeding your family and that you're able to really stick with more whole food based meals. If you are listening to this and have been wanting to try our meal plans, you can go to prepdish.com/MPM, short for Meal Prep Monday. We have 14 days free. If you've been listening for a long time and you're thinking, this might be a good time to try it, go in there again, 14 days. Try it out, see how it works. And there you go. Okay, so for today's episode, I'm going to wrap up our little 3-part mini episode on tidying. I hope you enjoyed the interview I did last week. If you haven't heard that, you can go back. I had Katie Wells talking about decluttering and just really enjoyed our conversation. For today, what I wanted to talk through is 4 questions to ask as you're doing a pantry clean out. So this recently, over the past month or two, my husband and I actually, and sometimes what we'll do is we'll like literally set a timer and be like, okay, let's do it for 30 minutes. And sometimes we'll end up doing a little longer. But I find sometimes the clean outs, if you set a timer, they don't take quite as long as you think, right? Or it's like, you just kind of have to get the momentum and get going. And sometimes even, a 20 or 30 minute block, especially with 2 people, can really makes significant progress. One thing I could suggest is as you're listening to this, maybe you could go in and, even do 10 or 15 minutes. Sometimes I do like to, I'll just do like half a day of like clearing something out. But sometimes what I'm doing when I'm tackling like one room at a time is I'll just try and do 10 or 15 minutes a few days that week. And then by the end of the week, it's kind of a little more reorganized or tidied up. And of course, with the ultimate goal, which I think we kind of talked about last week of being, having everything kind of in its place and having a system so that it stays, more tidy over time. But I do find that even if you have kind of this whole system that, eventually comes a time where you need to kind of go through and do a quick declutter. So here are 4 questions that I find myself asking in a pantry clean out, but really this would be a clean out of any room that I'm working on. Number 1 is, do I even need this? This is a question where sometimes I find it's better if I'm doing the cleaning by myself, because a lot of times my answer is no. And I think the trap is, will I ever need this? And I try to avoid that question unless it's like, if you're going to ask that question, then be like, well, have I needed this in the past year or 2 years? And if the answer is no, then you probably aren't going to need it in the next 2 years either. So do I need this? If the answer is no, go straight to donate for me. Number 2 is, do I need this many of this thing? So an example of this is water bottles. The Yeti cups and mugs, like I know they're really popular. Yes, they're very nice, but we only need so many of those. And over the years, I feel like, every few months we add 1 or 2 more. Someone's gifting those. And yes, they're nice, but over time it's like, well, how many of these do we actually need? Do they all have tops? Do they all still function? So really figuring out how much of any given item you actually need. And if it's less than you have, then, kind of donate is appropriate. Question number 3 is this the correct place for this item? So in something like the pantry, sometimes we'll have, like for a while we were storing paper towels in there. Well, do we need the paper towels in there? Could they be stored? We also have a shop area. And so just kind of figuring out as you're going through reevaluating what should be stored in this area, One thing we did end up moving out was like a bigger cooler because it was taking up so much space and we weren't using it that often. And so that got stored in a different location just so it could kind of free up some space for other, like some pastas and rices and things that I actually am using on a more regular basis and that were more appropriate to be in the pantry. So, asking yourself if it's the correct location for that item and maybe move it to a different place. And then the fourth question is there something else that needs to be in here that isn't? So is there something I'm using on a very regular basis that I'm, constantly like having to run upstairs for or go someplace else to grab? So example would be, and this was a few years ago, but my husband installed like a first aid kit in our pantry. And that's been really nice. It's on the wall, it's visible, everyone knows it's there. And so that way, anytime, the boys need a Band-Aid or have any sort of little injury, everyone knows there's that first aid kit there. And sure, there's some Band-Aids stored upstairs and different places, but having it there is just really convenient and easy to point out for, if there's someone else in the house or childcare, and just everyone kind of knows that's where it's located. So that's an example of something that's like, oh yeah, that could be in the pantry and easily accessible for everyone that needs it. So those are the 4 questions. And then a few bonus thoughts here. As I'm doing this, I'm also looking, do I need to add, different containers to this space? Would labels help? So I know I talk about labels when I talk organization, but I find that labels just help to keep things in the spots that you want them to be in, because if there's a label, it just makes it very apparent for everyone, even yourself, as a reminder of like, this is what goes here and this is the intention behind it, just to make things more sustainable. I mean, the idea is that you kind of clean up and tidy and get everything in its place, and it ideally should stay that way. And that leads me into my second tip, which is once you have something as you want it, you can take a picture. So this was something my husband actually did. We have a humongous like 3-story bookshelf, but the bottom few shelves are all like kids' books. And one day he finally was like, I'm just going to completely organize this bookshelf. So he spent a few hours and like really had it exactly how he wanted it with all the books and this and that. And he did, actually, I think it was like a video. So he took like a quick video of like, okay, here's how the bookshelf should look. And then anytime anyone's picking it up, we can reference that video of like, oh, this is how everything can fit and be the right way. I've done this for things like I have a little couch area with tons of pillows. So you can take pictures of that, but anything like that you have, like once you get to a place like this is what I want it to look like, you can take a picture to share with people. You can also even just use it to reference yourself. So that way, the next time you go to tidy it, you don't have to like think through, oh, how do I want this to look? You can just go back and be like, okay, here's what I want to copy. This is what I want it to look like. So pictures or videos of reference can be helpful for that. Okay, so those are my questions when you are clearing out or tidying up your pantry, or could probably help for other spaces as well. This is going to wrap up our little mini series on tidying and decluttering. I have a quick favor before we wrap up today's episode. If you are a longtime listener and have not left a rating or review, I would love if you could just take a moment right now and do that. That helps other people to find this podcast. That's one of my goals here in 2025 is to get this podcast in front of more people. So whether that's through a rating or review, if you also just know of a person, a friend that you think would benefit from either today's episode or the podcast in general, if you could do a quick share or a screenshot and send that to that person, I would really appreciate it. Those little shares really help in terms of growth of the podcast. So thank you for doing that. And then just a last reminder that if you do want to try out the Prep Dish meal plans, you can go to prepdish.com/NPM. You get 14 days. You can try all the different plans. So gluten-free, paleo, low carb, super fast, which is my personal favorite. But you get access to a login so you can kind of see everything that a subscriber would get. You get to access all of that for free for 14 days. That should give you a chance to try out at least 2 different weeks of meal plans and see how that works in your family and in your life. So if you want to do that, the link will also be in the show notes. That's all I have for today. I will be back again next week with another episode.